computing for education, computing for enthusiasts, and computing for literally everyone. It's February 1992, and this is Yestazine. I'm talking to a specific section of the audience here, but the universal reference for school computing in the late 80s in the UK was the BBC Micro, the plucky 8-bit underdog that could. And by could, I mean cost about twice as much as machines that were more powerful than it. Nonetheless, the combination of a tie-in with a national broadcaster, legendary educational software, and some genuinely good games meant that the Beeb has a special significance for UK viewers between the ages of roughly 35 and 45. So that's about a quarter of you then. This may struggle to match the Micro Machines episode viewer count. We're certainly not here to bag on the Beeb, mind. It launched at the end of 1981, before the Spectrum, and was made in broadly the same spec until 1994, a year after the demise of Sinclair's finest. At one point, over 8 in every 10 UK schools had at least one of them, making it as popular as Whiskas cat food. If you've been glazing over at this point, yes, that reference is why we have a version of Countdown involving some of the worst of humanity, and also Susie Dent is there. One magazine was there pretty much from day one, Acorn User, named after the company that made the Micro. It launched in July 1982, when said Acorn was just getting on top of the supply problems that threatened to wreck the whole thing before it started, and in time for me to issue a minor correction to past me. A few years ago, official PlayStation UK became the decidedly unofficial Play, and every hack website and video maker called it the end of a line of official magazines stretching right back to 1988's Nintendo Power, apparently the first one in the world. Almost like they get their memories from Wikipedia and half-read articles on American sites. I claimed at the time the answer was actually 1984's Amstrad Computer User. In a slightly ironic twist of fate, I write this in the week that Play itself was closed down, and it turns out Acorn User was an official magazine, being published for Acorn Computers Limited. On the plus side, that makes the so-called journalists, none of whom are fit to tie Oscar or Jess's bootlaces, nearly twice as wrong as they previously were, whereas I'm still right, because I can find no reference to AU being official after episode 3, long before ACU existed, and thus I was right about the length of the Unbroken run. In short, never believe anything about computers you see on the BBC because they can't even remember their own damn machines. You may also have heard of the Acorn Electron, a slightly cut down version of the Beeb which in true British manufacturer fashion was announced for a 1982 launch, actually launched in late summer the next year, and was effectively abandoned a couple of years after that. Classic. And if you're sitting there either not being British or being too young to remember this, then I'm very much afraid you likely still have them to thank every single day of your life, and indeed would not be able to watch this show, or anything, without Acorn. But we'll get there. They laid the groundwork in 1987. While the BBC Micro shares its MOS 6502 with machines like the NES, albeit with some clever tricks, Acorn designed a second processor for it. The ARM evaluation system cost £4,500, plus tax. ARM stood originally for Acorn RISC Machine, and RISC for Reduced Instruction Set Computer, meaning the whole initialism pleasingly ends with computer machine. The theory is, by concentrating on making instructions simple, these processors could be much quicker than traditional ones, and very quickly, only really Intel bothered to compete on speed with these new designs. Ultimately, even they caved to the extent they bought designs from Acorn. The big fruits of ARM's research appear soon after with the Archimedes computer. In a world that barely contained the Amiga 500 and before Atari released the STE, they demonstrated their machine, helpfully also named A500, on the BBC's Micro Live show, which would surely break several thousand competition laws these days. The A500, and indeed the commercially launched A305, 310 and 440, were full 32-bit RISC designs, and they were quick. On Micro Live, they'd shown it outperforming the then current choice of posh schools, a Research Machines Intel 386, by an order of magnitude. 2 years of technical lead for the Atari and Commodore was wiped out instantly, despite Acorn's MD noting in our magazine that, over the past 2 years, we've paid the price of having no 16-bit micro. The downside, of course, is, while an STFM was £450 with a monochrome monitor, and the TV-capable Amiga 500 under 500, the basic A305 with a mono monitor was nearly £1,000. We fast forward to 1992 and join the renamed BBC Acorn user, thanks to the BBC now owning the publishing company, with issue 115 in February that year. Don't worry, we've got a game to play. But first, at the height of the Amiga ST battle, and 32 bits of those machines approaching rapidly, where was Acorn? By luck or judgment, the cover predicts the future. Touchscreens are ubiquitous enough 32 years later that kids today don't understand the concept of screens that are not. In the years since issue 1, Acorn user has discarded several machines, now supporting the A3000, which was the BBC badged model of the Archimedes, alongside the Arch itself and the remaining BBC Micro users. It's a chonky boy, but even so, a 140-page magazine can only devote 9 pages to games coverage, and 5 of those are adverts. Equally, the failure of it to replicate the school success of the Micro is probably shown by the education section just being a single page, almost entirely about art programs and some stuff lightly remastered from the 8-bits. Not the kind of thing that would convince schools to drop the money over the rapidly improving IBMs, despite Acorn claiming success in this area. For almost any internet-based company these days, you can find evidence of someone who did, or had the chance to do it earlier, and never converted it to success. Blockbuster famously nearly bought Netflix at one stage, for instance, and this magazine reveals another. 2 years before Amazon existed, and a full 6 before it sold anything that wasn't books, the company that could have changed the face of worldwide commerce forever was British electronic component retailer Maplin. Because they've set up online ordering. The World Wide Web had only been available to the public for a year, so you have to do it by connecting your computer up manually to their phone line. But once you've done so, you'll only need your customer number from your previous mail-in purchases, and you can shop for every component you can ever need. Charmingly, the magazine makes much of the fact you can see what's in stock and adjust your purchases accordingly. The rest of the story goes exactly how you might expect. Amazon now own everything, including quite possibly the server sending you this very video. Maplin was sold 3 times to ever more incompetent owners, died in 2018, and now only exists as a zombie puppet brand name on the front of a website owned by some figurative vultures. An advert reveals the price has improved at least. The BBC branded A3000, like the A500, not to be confused with the Amiga of the same name, can be had for £600 now. Problem is, the Amiga is now half that with a giant pile of software. More concerningly, the pensionable 8-bit BBC Micro, now coming with a monitor and in slightly fancier Master 128 form, will cost you nearly £700. I can't suspect they were winning many sales of that from an Amiga, or the now easily sub £100 competitor 8-bits. A Watford Electronics ad a few pages later suggests that even on its own a BBC Master was still £100 more than a Miggy. That Watford ad though tells you what's changed from the olden days. With online shopping not a thing unless you were Maplin, then if you sold something, the only way to tell anyone was catalogues or adverts. And thus, this advert runs to 14 pages. 10% of this magazine is one advert, something that wouldn't be true again until the absolute nadir of Maverick Edition the One Amiga. I note incidentally that this giant 14-page ad of everything for your Archimedes includes exactly 0 games, controllers, or game accessories. Acorn user did have a cover disc, but it chose to do it in the most obtuse way possible, so you're going on the journey I did. Firstly, you only get that disc if you're a subscriber. I've seen that before. Amiga Format offered an extra disc to subs for a while, but their justification of the value of said disc is worth breaking out just for the humour value. They say if you purchase the disc separately, then they would be £6 each. Therefore, the sub gets you discs worth £70 for free. Excellent work. If we ignore, of course, they're the ones who set that £6 price, as you find out later in the issue. So they could charge £700 for each disc, and just as justifiably claim the sub saved you 10 grand. Overseas subs don't get the disc without a more expensive subscription, which values said discs at a considerably more likely £14 a year for the 3.5 inch. I highly doubt many people took them up on paying 4 times the cost of a magazine for the disc. The subscription advert only lets you know it contains all the software from the Yellow Pages. UK viewers will be wondering how much software you traditionally found in a phone book, unless they mean it's a free digital copy of Fly Fishing by J.R. Hartley. But a glance at the content shows it's also a section of this magazine covering 10 pages of type-ins. Type-ins for what is anyone's guess at this point. Helpfully, Acorn User have classified them simply as listings 1 to 13, although they have at least told you what machines they'll run on. The Arch blessed with a surprising level of backwards compatibility, unlike, say, the Amiga and C64. The final clue here is a direction to go to page 48 for info, and suddenly something I skipped over 30 pages earlier makes sense. Info was a section simply billed as Dave and Dave taking a look at software. I had wondered why the key piece of info missing was how to get hold of any of this software. For a moment there, I thought this was going to be a repeat of my adventures in the Italian software market last month. Thankfully, that's not the case. You won't find a poorly hacked version of Rolling Thunder here, or even a demo of Pipe Mania. It's all a lot more technical. The winner is a cloud generator, which seems a lot less interesting than an iteration of the classic Evolution life sim in Second. Other than that, it's mostly utilities. I'm not going to try any of these. The disc appears to no longer exist online, and I do not love any of you enough to type in 3 pages of listing in order to display a cloud. Even if that would technically allow me to save a cloud to the cloud. So now the big event. Games! As mentioned, I'm afraid some of you are going to be disappointed here because the UK's premier Archie magazine feels it can only spare 4 of its 140 pages to talk about them. And most of that is a discussion about how games will take advantage of what is essentially a mid-generation refresh of the range, with the arrival of the ARM 3 and 2 MB as standard. The main game used as an example is from the Fourth Dimension, one of the machine's few publisher supporters, and one that appears to have remained exclusive to Acorn throughout their entire life, which would unfortunately come to an end about a year from this issue. Their obscurity to the rest of the world rather covered by the fact that even Moby Games doesn't know all their games, missing among others 2 of the ones we're about to talk about. I'm not saying Acorn User aren't driving game or racing experts, but the section on the Fourth Dimension begins, the first title to receive upgrade treatment will be its Formula 1 racing game Saloon Cars. For non-car people, allow me to put this in a way you might understand. The first title to receive upgrade treatment will be its Apple's game Oranges 95. The upgrade for the new machines promises a better frame rate, fully working mirrors, and some other graphical improvements. It will also cost you a tenner, apparently a small charge, if you already own the base game. For that, they won't even give you the 4 new courses without buying yet another upgrade. I wonder if financial problems were already starting to make themselves known. I should have known. There's about 4 videos total of this game on YouTube, 2 of which are of the demo mode exclusively, and there's a reason for that. It took me a solid 3 hours of pissing about to even get the thing to run on Arculator. Over on YouTube, JASPP's video bemoans oversensitive controls, and running it on an emulator in 2024 doesn't make it easier, because the mouse is flaky and I've resorted to keyboard. You're watching my demo footage here, and that's because when I try to play it, it looks like this. The manual includes the circuit diagram, pun presumably not intended, to make your own analog steering wheel. This is a company that knew the average person that bought their target computer, isn't it? I can't say a lot about the game, of course, but it at least looks impressive and sounds abysmal. It's doing what appears to be a 3D world at a time when not many could, and those opponent cars, even in the unupgraded version, are impressive. I can see the attraction of a very broadly realistic touring car game in 1992. We're half a decade before Toka, of course, but I also note that the Arch got Lotus 2. This, or Lotus 2. The paid upgrade policy appears universal for the 17 games they have planned for what I presume is actually 1992, given 91 has already finished. They're busy causing more controversy with their game Karma, having announced the final version will be 2 megabytes only after they'd already started selling it. Acorn user described the beta as, "Fly around and look at some textureless circles that are supposed to represent planes." For 1 megabyte machine owners, this is all they'll get. I can get the proper version running at least, although I'm starting to wish I hadn't. The manual includes lengthy sections on mass, velocity, and an entire section simply called Geometry. What it hasn't told you at any point is how to, well, fly anywhere. In fact, the first mention of controlling the game occurs in section 8 of the manual. Trying to follow this leaves me spinning randomly in space and causes me to question exactly why you need 2 megabytes and an ARM 3 to run this when Starglider on the ZX Spectrum looks like this. But anyway, the review for that is apparently next month, so maybe in another episode they'll make sense of it for me. This issue, Acorn user find room to give reviews to 4 games, 2 of which are for the 4th dimension, and they cover a good mix of genres. There's isometric adventure, Pandora's Box, which they excitedly describe as what Nightlore fans have been waiting for. There's Wargame Waterloo, from a publisher small enough they appear to have a residential address in a postcode that doesn't exist, a metaphor for gaming support on the Acorn in general. The location they were trying to type, NW6 3LS, is as generic a London street as you'd care to visit. The game itself appears complex in that Acorn user recommend background reading, so let's skip over that one for now, only to encounter, inevitably, James Pond. While it's a law that every 90s and 00 machines has James Pond game on, surprisingly, this time it's not Robocod. Although don't worry, that's on its way next year. The original is the better game for me, still being something unique to the franchise and its protagonist rather than being an incredibly generic European-style platformer, which I'm always surprised anyone thinks is special. It's the final game, and the second 4th Dimension title we're here to talk about, because it's actually the reason for this episode. After a conversation with an actual real human in the actual real world about video games. Somehow, it was an Archimedes they had as a young'un, which probably explains why they now get to call themselves Doctor, and I make childish jokes on the internet. And you'd need the patience to become a doctor both to write and finish this game. Cataclysm. The review certainly begins promisingly.
There were about 9 important things I had to do this week, none of which involved Cataclysm. And the fact that not one of them was done rests squarely on the shoulders of this new game from the 4th Dimension.
Cataclysm is, if you are required to put it into a genre, a puzzle game, and one where the goal of all of its many levels is the same. Water falls into the level from the pipes in the top half. A good portion of it needs to land in the funnel at the bottom. And of course it's not going to be that easy, because as anyone like me who owns a new build house with a 10-year-old roof knows, water can get everywhere whether you like it or not. To help, you have a couple of tools, most notably a limited number of blocks you can place down in order to get the water to go where you want it to, and this will be your primary method of completing the levels. Beyond that, there are some valves that hold the water until you knock them out, giving a measure of control of exactly when the torrent arrives. You can't think about it too long though, because every level has a strict time limit, and it's one that runs even after you've finished everything you want to do. So you might have to wait some time to find out if you did everything else quickly enough. And given water is already released into levels on a timed sequence, and water that falls off the bottom not through the funnel is lost, it does feel like they could have taken the whole time system out of the game and lost very little. It's less egregious than in, say, Bomboozle Mind, at least it doesn't also punish you for daring to stand still and have a think. Which is good, because it allows you to admire the USP of that game. It's very early to be trying to simulate water physics, and Cataclysm tries to do just that to the best of its ability. Looking at it in 2024, of course, you can see where it's cheating. It's reduced the water to a series of small lines, and I can't quite work out if it's alternating or choosing at random if water falls left or right off a horizontal surface, because it falls vertically rather than with an arc. I'm nitpicking for what is a very impressive attempt at a very difficult problem. Even if you accept it's a lot of independent mini-sprites, it's a lot of independent mini-sprites being kept track of at any one time, and the game never misses a beat no matter how complex the course it's dealing with is. And it can get complex. There are grids that allow water past, but not you, and scatter it as a bonus. There's blocks that work the opposite way. There's stairs, there's pressure pads that will only collapse when a sufficient quantity of water hits them, and of course there's the small matter of the funnel itself, which, just to give an additional problem, can potentially overflow if you send it too much, too quickly. That would be enough of a game for me, and perhaps it should have been, because from level 3 Cataclysm also introduces enemies who are semi-passive at first, but later on will start taking shots at you, as will turrets. This feels unnecessary, like someone looked at the design and chickened out of making a pure physics puzzle game, and demanded it be more of an arcade offering. The controls don't support this, and you don't have any means to fight back, which also means a run can be defeated because you can't get to a specific plug with the timing you need to finish a level through no fault of your own. Or you end up with the situation our reviewer flags where they claim to have taken 65 attempts on one of the later levels because of a single enemy. The game does tell you your number of attempts, so I can believe this. If the term retro game existed in 1992, the reviewer would probably have used it, describing it as feeling ancient other than the water physics with its sparse graphics and sound and clunky 2D control method. They're not wrong, but 1992, 1987 or even 2024, I don't know another game like this. The Arch doesn't have a lot of exclusives and certainly not a lot you can't play at least near equivalents of elsewhere. There's 10,000 games pretty much like Saloon Cars, for instance. As proof of that statement, this isn't Saloon Cars, it's Touring Car Racer on the Amiga, and I'd wager a good portion of you didn't notice it wasn't the same game as 3 minutes ago. Cataclysm is unique, and like the reviewer, I've been playing it a lot more than would be justified by the word count of this section. You probably should too, but you'll need to sort out an Acorn or appropriate emulator to do it. At least you won't need a 2MB one, mind. We close out with those productivity sections. They're not always the ones you might expect though. Music gets 2 pages, but so does data handling, which in this case means file compression. I couldn't let it pass without reading this section though.
Imagine trying to design a spell checker program that contains an 80,000 word dictionary, stored in an uncompressed form. If you imagine that one letter occupies 1 byte and each word contains an average of 5 letters, that would be 400,000 bytes or 390k. Obviously, some form of compression is needed.
Obviously. Who can even imagine handling a 390k file? Incidentally, John's reading of that line is 5000k. But can mere storage even contain the wonder of retrobytes? There's a printer page where they laud the appearance of colour laser quality printing for £800, something like $2,000 in 2024. Let's see what it'd owe its HP. I joke though, at this point colour lasers cost about as much as a family car, so the saving is huge, and this is HP before they turned super evil. We had one of this range of HPs in my family at the time, and it printed an entire secondary school of annoying homework assignments without ever once asking us to sign up for a subscription or install Blue Ink before it would print in black and white. This slightly earlier model than ours has one extra huge drawback though. You could fit a tricolour cartridge containing cyan, yellow and magenta, or you could have a black cartridge containing, well, black. You couldn't have both at once. So either you are printing in black and white, or the black areas of your picture are going to look what Acorn users describe as muddy brown. So C64 owners were covered at least. And of course with magenta involved, so are Spectrum owners. And at 50 seconds to print a page, CPC owners will at least recognise the frame rate. Right, that's everyone annoyed. It's not just buying the printers where things have got cheaper. Even the laughably expensive modern HP ink cartridges will run you roughly 10p a page. Even before inflation, a colour cartridge is about 50% more back in 1992. And of course you'd end up using a bunch of that colour ink to do black. Of course what you actually do in 2024 you couldn't do then is spend half that 1992 cost of that HP on an Epson EcoTank or equivalent, and then spend less than half a penny a page on ink they cannot copy protect. A text editor is perhaps the most basic desktop application, says Dave Acton, before managing to spend a page talking about one. So let's move on to that cover feature, tantalisingly at the prime position of page 129 of a 140-page magazine. Touchscreens, something we absolutely take for granted everywhere these days. My tablet has one, my phone has one, even my laptop has one, although the main purpose of that one is for me to remember it exists when someone accidentally touches the screen when pointing at something on it. I know firsthand children these days barely understand screens that are not touchscreens. And in that respect, Acorn user nails the start of the article, pointing out that touchscreens will be much easier for a child to understand than the Acorn mouse-driven interface that itself was still new to a lot of adults. At this point, the children were the ones who got it. These are not, though, touchscreens of the type we'd see today, as you can see from this photo of a child barely understanding the brief. They were often clunky devices that went over a standard screen and were about as attractive as a video game with a Commodore color scheme, Amstrad frame rate and Spectrum attribute clash. Just reminding them. The screens used two basic technologies: the British TouchTech 3000 and the American Touch Window. The TouchTech based device fits over the classic Cub monitor, star of many a British classroom, and uses similar IR technology to your classic remote control. Your finger breaks laser-type beams, allowing the screen to pass a location to the host software. Predictably, Acorn user found this a little unreliable. With the depth of the device, if a child actually touched the screen, the actual beams were far enough away from the monitor it'd pick up their trailing fingers as well, producing false readings. The two Touch Window devices are smaller and more generic, able to attach to most monitors using Velcro rather than the TouchTech's bulky construction. This simpler and lighter approach has other advantages too. The magazine points out you can put it over a picture you want to trace, for instance. There's no reason it actually has to be over a monitor, giving it a use as a drawing tablet of sorts. Ironically, the one thing it won't work with is the Cub. It wouldn't attach to its curved screen. The Touch Window is also similar to a modern approach, being clear perspex, and another problem Acorn user foresee is the one that plagues us all today: the horror of greasy fingerprints everywhere. Touch Window has another advantage too. While the Micro VTech can only work with the limited software supplied with it, the Touch Window based devices can, a little awkwardly, work with almost everything, so long as you remember to switch between move and click modes to do it. Not as good as today, but you can work through it. The biggest problem there is other programs can cover up the window you need to switch mode. I sense Acorn users slightly missed the point by lauding the use of the keyboard to bring that window to the front. It's interesting though, we continue to talk about the use of touchscreens being purely something for children, and the majority of the software talked about is at least education adjacent. Our hosts missed the chance to predict that 20 years down the line, touchscreens would be basically ubiquitous on any machine smaller than your cat. Of course, 1995's 5-year-olds are now in their late 30s and have kids of their own, so maybe this is just a result of time. It would though have been a lucky 5-year-old with access to this. The cheapest of the Touch Window-based devices will cost you £235, and again that's nearly 3 times as much now. The much less useful British device is somehow even more. So a clear victory for the Americans on this one, but don't worry about that, they're about to get their comeuppance. Because, other than the puzzle page, we're done with the magazine, but we are in no way done with Acorn. Because whether you're British, American, or from one of the other leading countries, I said earlier you probably couldn't watch this show without Acorn, and I meant it. The computer line isn't why. While 1992 saw some incremental updates and the charming A4 laptop, the Archimedes as a hardware platform was about to go on the decline, following its UK market mates, the Amiga and ST. There was a next generation, the RISC PC, notable for not only having Acorn's ARM-based processors, but also allowing you to just fit something else as well, giving you the ability to have a machine that could run all the PC software alongside that designed natively for it. The problem mainly is, there wasn't enough of the native stuff, so it quickly became more sensible to just buy the PC, especially by the late 1990s, where even a significantly more powerful RISC PC was starting to be overhauled in pure grunt by the x86-based designs. The RISC PC was abandoned by Acorn in 1998, along with its then unreleased successor. This occurred, unfortunately, literally the month after the magazine had been sold. Acorn user would roll on until 2003 before being merged with other titles at its new home, a remarkable run for a never entirely mainstream machine. Mainstream though is exactly what happened to the CPUs, and the more well-read of you will have recognised ARM being mentioned repeatedly, because here the Brits won. In 1990, Acorn spun the processor division off into Advanced RISC Machines Limited, later known as ARM Holdings. As Acorn were closing their computer production in 1998, ARM was being floated on both the London Stock Exchange and Nasdaq. By then, you could well have been using one. If you were a touchscreen pioneer, you may have had the Apple Message Pad, aka Newton, a device a decade and a half ahead of its time, being a touchscreen tablet that recognised handwriting and essentially did everything the iPad would eventually nail in 2010. The Newton, though, like this magazine, came out in 1992, using an ARM6 as part of a joint venture between Apple and ARM. Possibly the one similarity the iPad has with its underrated grandfather is that it too used an ARM CPU, the Cortex A8. So what are you watching this on? Is it an iPad? If so, every single iPad ever made has an ARM CPU. Is it an iPhone maybe? Because same. Is it a Mac with an M1, 2 or 3 chip? All ARM. Don't think you get out of this one, Android users, either. The Pixels use Google Tensor chips, all ARM based. Samsung? The Galaxy uses Samsung's Exynos in most of the world, ARM based. Elsewhere, it shares the Qualcomm Snapdragon with almost every phone ever not covered by the above. I assume I don't need to tell you what that's ultimately based off. Your TV? Probably ARM. In fact, chances are the only device you could possibly be watching this on that isn't directly ARM related would be a desktop PC or games console. All of those will be based on RISC technology though, and the Nintendo Switch uses an Nvidia Tegra, based on the ARM11. I tried to count the number of ARM-based devices in my house and I've run out of numbers. If you hadn't heard of the BBC Micro or Acorn before this episode, if you lived in a country where the Apple II was the education king, then Acorn had the last laugh. In 2024, even if you're using an Apple, you're using an Acorn. It shouldn't be surprising, of course. After all, big trees often come from little acorns. On the back page, a new adventure game. No, really. Despite the looks of it, Crimson Diamond was released this year. And that's the point, really. A love letter to old Sierra games, Crimson Diamond even retains a text parser in order to have you communicate with the world. A massive diamond has been discovered in Crimson, and geologist Nancy Maple travels to a near-abandoned inn there to investigate. But everyone has their own motivations for being there, and not all of them appear entirely legit. Lone dev author Julia Minamata isn't blind to improvements in the last 30 years, though. Crimson includes a constantly updated notebook with your achievements and next tasks, many shortcuts for the text parser, and even an inbuilt hint system. But this is one of those times you don't need to believe me. If you love the old murder mystery games like the Laura Bow mystery series, you will enjoy this game. Not my words, Carol, the words of Roberta Williams, Queen of Adventure Gaming. And if this kind of thing is your bag, baby, then return to us at the end of next month for the last Jestazine of the year, as it is, by tradition, the annual December episode, and the magazine we've picked reviews a game called The Colonel's Bequest by some woman called Roberta Williams. In the meantime, mash some of the buttons below this video to make sure your device hasn't seized, and we'll see you then. Stay fresh, cheese bags.